Okay, so we're going to have a second panel, and the members of that panel can go ahead and come up and have a seat on the stage. So we're so fortunate to have several different groups represented here. So we have, and I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, because I don't know, I wrote all the names down, but I'm not sure everybody's here. But we have a couple of women who have been gestational surrogates. We have a couple of teenagers who are the children of women who have been gestational surrogates. And we have some young folks who are children via surrogacy. They were born through the process of surrogacy. And so the purpose of this time together, and I'm really curious and anxious to hear some of your personal experiences, we really want to talk about, we know that there are misconceptions around the type of people who become surrogates, the type of people who use surrogates, you know, the kinds of kids who are born through surrogacy. We know these misconceptions are out there, but I think it's really important that we put faces to the misconceptions, that we hear the stories of people's lives who have been impacted by surrogacy and what it means to them to know that they're the subject of this debate, and maybe what some of those misconceptions have, how those misconceptions may have potentially impacted them personally. So why don't we go down, and I'm going to step out so I can see who's who. And if you just say your name and who you are, and then I'll ask a couple of questions just to open it up.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie. I am from Connecticut, and I am a 4-time gestational carrier for a total of 6 babies. I'm also an adoptive mother, and I have 2 biological children. So if you add that up, that's 8.
I should be okay with this. I'm decent at projecting. My name's RJ. I'm this one's son. I'm the son of a woman who had 6 surrogate children. Most interesting thing really about me, I'm 18.
Hi, my name is Elinor. I'm Ron's daughter, if anybody knows him. I'm 18, and I was born through surrogacy.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm 15. I was born through surrogacy, and I have 2 dads, and I live in Long Island.
Hello, I am Molly. I am a 2-time surrogate. I delivered my first surrogate baby last summer, and I'm currently 31 weeks pregnant.
Well, welcome to everyone. I'll start with Stephanie and Molly. If both of you maybe could just share a little bit about, you know, when you were a surrogate, when you were pregnant. I mean, now you're pregnant. But how would you say that you perceived others' misperceptions, if that's the best way to ask it? Because I think, I mean, I work with lots of surrogates, and I don't know that anyone we haven't talked about or thought through the types of comments that people can make, like, how can you give away your own child, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that may be one of the biggest misperceptions about the whole process, because I've yet to meet a successful surrogate who felt that it was her child. So just kind of wondering, you know, how you manage that in your day-to-day, and also what impact you think it may have had on your own family.
I feel like there's different levels of people's misconceptions. So usually on a day-to-day basis, it's like everyone who I'm close to kind of knows what's going on, but it'll be like at school pickup, you know, like a kid's mom in the class, and then they'll say something to my daughter like, oh, you know, oh, your mommy's having a little sister for you, and then it just gets like really awkward really fast, and it's like, no, it's not her little sister, and then I have to get into like a lesson on surrogacy for, you know, this person that I encountered. So that's a lot of what I run into on a day-to-day basis. My husband actually enjoys it, because he likes to say, oh yeah, that's not my baby, and then like look at everybody's face. So that's his favorite thing to do, which is then also embarrassing, because then he'll wander away and I'll have to explain like, no, I didn't really cheat on him, you know, it's surrogacy. So,
And
so
How did you handle that situation with your child, let's say, and I don't know the ages of your own children?
It's usually with my younger two, so they're 5 and 10. So, and they know what's going on, and like I explain it to them, like mommy's caring for her friends, I'm having a baby for my friends. So usually, they'll be fine while I explain it, and then we'll get in the car and they'll be like, so when are you having a baby, brother or sister, for me? So it's like they understand it to a point, but then it's like, they're still like, okay, come on, why? So they're okay, and then I have to get back into, no, we just, mommy's done, this is what we're doing. So it's like kind of like every few weeks we have to have the same conversation. So, and then, I have had a few situations where I've encountered people who are just adamant with the fact that, how can you give your baby away? And that's probably what bothers me the most, because it's like, it was never my baby to start with. I can't give away something that's not mine. It's not, this is my friend's baby. It's like, it was never a thought in my head that it was mine. So that also ends up bothering. And then those people are just so, like, they just keep going around in this circle, like, no, it's your blood and you're related. And then I'm trying to get into like an embryo explanation, and they're just not getting that. And it's just, so you just have to end up walking. It's like, you know what, we're not gonna agree. I need to walk away from you right now, or I'll get arrested. So, because I can't deal with this anymore. So it's like, it's definitely something that comes up in some form, quite frequently throughout the pregnancy. And it's more so when you're showing versus like kind of when you're not, I think, with that.
How about you, Stephanie?
So my first set of surrogate twins are almost 13 now, and I kind of separate surrogacy, like the before social media and the now kind of side of it. Like, things are definitely different. 13 years ago, I didn't know anyone personally that had been a surrogate. If I said I was a surrogate, people wouldn't be like, oh my God, I know someone who was a surrogate, or like, this person was one. And so it's definitely a little easier to explain it now than it was back then. A little anecdotal story with this one here. He was in first grade when I was pregnant with the twins, and drop-off came, and the teacher asked him, are you having a brother or a sister? And he replied, cousins. And that was fun. So she took me aside and she was like, he said something, it was kind of weird, and I explained the whole situation, and she said, how would you feel about like coming and talking to the kids at school about it? It was Happy Feet had just come out, and they had just talked about how the male penguin takes care of the egg. And so she said, we're trying to explain to people, we have a couple of kids that have single parents, and some that live with their grandparents, and some that are adopted, and like, we want to kind of talk about how different families are made. And so went in with him, and he stood up in front of class, and I said, babe, do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to? Mom, I got this. He's like 6 years old at the time, and he stands up, and we kind of called them Auntie Melissa and Uncle Brian at the time, and he says, Auntie Melissa and Uncle Brian's love made the babies, but her tummy was broken. So the doctor put them in my mom, and we're taking care of them until they're going to be born, and then they'll go home. Like, it was that simple for a 6-year-old to explain surrogacy, and like, everybody just kind of got it. And he would read to my belly and kind of talk to the baby and tell them that they're going to go home, and that they have parents that are waiting for them, and they're going to be so loved. And he was so excited that like, he got to experience that, but I wasn't bringing a baby home, and he got to like stay the only child. It wasn't until he was 12 and wanted a life of his own that he begged me to have a baby that I would keep, or get a hobby. I think that's what you said, right? No, you literally said, like, he actually said, like, Mom, you either need to have a baby you can keep or get a hobby. Like, something, please. Yeah. I think having the twins that I had for gay parents was one of the easier pregnancies for me to handle, because I always felt, while I was so excited and honored to be able to carry other people's children, I felt like I was taking something away from a woman who couldn't have that experience. And I really felt like, I almost felt like guilty that I got to have it and she didn't. And with the guys, there wasn't any part of that. Like, they knew neither one of them were going to carry them. So it just made it a little easier for me to not feel guilty about calling and being like, oh my God, guess what happened? Like the first kick, or to complain about it, the backaches and everything else. I think for me though, the question that we always get is that, is it hard for you to give up the baby? And I learned the perfect phrase very quickly that has worked for me, and it's that I was never giving it up, I was giving it back. And when you can sit there and explain to someone how amazing it feels to be trusted with someone else's human being, like, that's, like, it's gonna make me cry. Seriously, like, people create these little embryos that are gonna be humans and then trust me to carry it. Knowing that, like, if they're type A like me, not knowing what I'm eating every day, what I'm drinking, if I'm getting enough sleep, if I'm working out, if I'm stressed out, if I'm yelling at the kids, like, that type of, like, giving up that level of control, and just trusting me to carry their child and to nurture it and to, you know, to grow it until it's ready to be given back. When I tell people that, like, I'm amazed by that, it's a little easier for them to understand how I can give it back. And they kind of change their perspective and see that, you know, it's a trust issue on both sides. So that's how we've been answering that question for the last 13 years.
And RJ, so it's a perfect segue since that's your mom. I mean, it sounds like you had a real understanding and an excitement about your mom doing this. Did you have other people in your life? So what would you tell other kids, or what was the reaction, do you think, of your peers? And was there anything that you found hard to manage because they didn't understand, or even maybe their parents were feeding them information that made it hard to understand?
Yeah, I got tons of questions growing up because it felt like, to everyone else, and me included, every year my mom would come into school with another kid. And we bounced around from school to school a lot. So it was rare early that I had the same kids 2 years through elementary school, but when I got to middle school and really stayed in the same school from 6th to 12th grade, they'd see my mom at the beginning of 6th grade year pregnant, and then they'd see her grow, and then she'd come to one of my games, and then she's just back to normal again, right? And then, like, 2 months later, it's a different sports season, and she comes and she's huge again. And everyone's like, so how many siblings do you have? Those that bothered to ask, and I'd answer, I have one. And they're like, you're lying, I've seen her pregnant 3 times. Why are you lying? So I'd have to try my best to explain to them, and it got easier because I'd obviously learn more and get more intelligent myself. But I actually had to do some research online when I was, like, she said, like, 8 or 9 at the oldest. Because people would ask me questions, and I'd answer them, but then they'd follow it up, and I wouldn't be able to answer it. So it was like a train. I'd get an answer, and then they'd come up with a new question that I'd have to research. And I don't know why anyone, including teachers, expected an 8-year-old to know what's going on inside of a woman's body when she's carrying a baby. But they all expected me to have all the answers. So I felt like I really did have to develop the capability to answer all those questions, and I'd try to explain as generously as I could. That's not my brother, not my sister. I call them my cousins, because if you've been to my house twice, you're my cousin. And we go from there. She carries it for a person who can't carry it themselves. That's all I know about it. I don't know any of the specifics. I don't know too many details. I can just tell you she's doing a service for another person who can't do that service for themselves, and I appreciate it. And then I'd get the follow-up questions of, is it difficult having your mom always pregnant? Is it hard giving up the baby like she gets asked? And it's really simple. No, it's not. Just do the same thing you would if it was your sibling. You treat your mom while it's in her stomach as if that's going to be your brother, and when it comes up, you go to the family if you have that opportunity. You talk to that family, and then say bye to the kid and see him when you can. It's not too difficult of a process, but the questions did get a lot, and at a young age, it made me have to adapt. And I didn't realize until maybe a year or 2 ago that everyone didn't have those kind of questions asked to them. I thought that was just normal, like, hey.
Well, but I think you make an important point for kids born through surrogacy and also for kids of surrogacy, that all kids understand reproduction developmentally, you know, I mean, really through the eyes of your 6-year-old self that explained it to your class. It's just the pureness of a child accepting a situation in front of them. As you get older, then you have more depth of understanding. I mean, it sounds like you had to get a head start on that maybe than some of your peers. But what about, like, Maddie, you're a child born through surrogacy, right? So tell us about your experience. And I'm curious for you and Elinor, at what age did you, I don't know, sort of know at a deeper level that this is how you came into the world, and maybe it was a little bit different than other kids?
So yeah, I was born through surrogacy, And I guess I started to learn more about like the whole process. I mean, it was never like hidden from me or anything. Like as I was young, like I'd start to notice like, oh, like other people don't have two dads. Like I'm like there's clearly something up. So like I'd like ask questions. They wouldn't like try and hide anything. Like sometimes they'd like draw me pictures, and like it wasn't really like that hard to understand. Like, and so I just get a lot of questions at like school and stuff, and people be confused, and it's not really that easy to explain this whole process to like a second grader when I'm in second grade. So, and I still get questions now because not everyone understands it, but basically.
Have you gotten comments? I mean, has anyone ever made negative comments to you that you've had to manage?
Not really like directly like negative, like, oh, that's so weird, you have two dads. Like, I come, like my town is pretty understanding, so it's not really I'm getting any like direct hate. But I'm sure if I went somewhere else where it's not as like socially acceptable, I'd be getting not as like nice responses. But it hasn't been a problem.
How about you, Elinor?
Back to like the first question where it was like if I ever like when I first noticed, but as like Maddie said, I never really had a point where I noticed like oh yeah, I was born through surrogacy, I have two dads, and that's not like the normal like what all my friends are like. It was always like I always knew I had two dads, and I guess I was generally aware that not everyone had two dads, but I never thought I was very, very like, I was like, it was abnormal in any way. I was like, yeah, well, I have two dads and they have a mom and a dad, and like they have just a mom, or like any sort of thing like that. So it was never like a huge issue for me. And also like explaining to my friends, when kids are younger, it's generally like a little bit easier to explain because like they haven't experienced like all of, like they're just younger, so it's like generally easier and simpler to like kind of say like this is like what I have and this is what you have and it's different and that's okay, and like there are no like misconceptions or anything like that. But as I like grew older, it was kind of like I was aware of it and they were aware of it, but like they were still generally understanding because I'm still a person, and usually people would know me before they know my whole situation. So like it's not like they saw like, oh, who's that weird kid like with two dads over there, like born through surrogacy. It was more of like, oh, okay, well that's a cool fact about you, like let's move on with our lives.
And so this is questions for everyone because I think it's going to be different depending on your own personal situation. But what concerns you about what you feel may be some of the misperceptions of surrogacy? Like what concerns you about a general public perception that you know not to be true, and what your thoughts are on that?
I got so tired of being asked how she felt about me sleeping with her husband. Or how my husband felt about me sleeping with another man. Like, I don't know how many times I answered that question. Being a nurse helps. I was able to kind of keep it casual in some instances, and when people really needed to know, I could get much more technical. But that was definitely one of those questions that was hard for me. The financial question kind of always killed me. There's people who don't think there's enough money in the world that they could do it for, and then celebrities start sharing about it, and everyone thinks that, like, since Kim and Kanye had a surrogate, like, we're getting, $500,000 a pregnancy, and so those kind of questions are
do you think
difficult to answer.
Yeah, and do you think people thought that because you were getting paid, that somehow that played into the whole process? Like a misunderstanding about what that piece of it was?
I mean, there's absolutely not a misunderstanding, but maybe everything's new until it's not, right? Like, once something becomes fairly routine, and it's common, then it's easy for people to understand. I don't know that it's very common for people to know someone who's been a surrogate, so they always have a lot of questions, but it's also not a situation where, aside from going online and like actually searching to become a surrogate, where you kind of figure out like how much a surrogate gets paid, or God forbid, like how much the intended parents have to pay for surrogacy. So I think that like there's such a wide range from like the low end to the high end that there's just so much like gray area. I try to add it up for people in a way that like makes sense. Like you can't just be doing it for money. And so people are like, well, why? Like, you know, like you go through 9 months of this and you better have a really big paycheck at the end. You can't, because when you add it up, I mean, even for a $50,000 surrogacy, a woman is pregnant on average for 280 days. That doesn't include the 2 or 3 months worth of workup we have to do before the IVF even happens, and then the 6 weeks plus postpartum. I mean, really, postpartum is a year long when you think about it. So like, if you add up all of that and then divide it by $50,000, I'm better off working at McDonald's if I need a second job. You know, like if you don't have the altruistic side of it, if you don't have like a visceral desire, and I'm sure Molly will agree, to like help people create families, like you can't do it.
Right.
And I think that that's probably one of the things that is the most hard for people to understand, and the thing that I get the most about, like how that could be enough.
Yeah, and I want to reframe the question a little bit, and then maybe we can just go down the line. What do you want people to know about surrogacy, and perhaps your experience, that you think people don't understand?
As long as the process is as it is for the intended parents, it's a pretty long process for a surrogate too. And I think that's something I really want people to know. Like, a surrogate doesn't lose their job and say, I'm going to be a surrogate so that I can get a paycheck. It can't happen like that. And these agencies, most of them do a really good job of making sure a surrogate is financially stable in order to do this, because it doesn't come with a paycheck that starts next week. Like, you don't sign the dotted line and then start getting money back. And so I think that's what I
How about you, RJ?
The biggest, like my mom said, the biggest thing I used to get growing up was questions about how this baby is directly related to me blood-wise. And people would actually try to tell me I was wrong a lot. I'd tell them, no, this baby's not related to me genetically in any way. She's just carrying it. And they'd tell me, no, it's inside your mom's stomach, so obviously it's related to you. It has her DNA. We're like third graders. They don't know what that means. They're just saying it because they read it somewhere. And I just wish everyone knew. And people would ask too, like, is the guy who's having the baby, did they have to have sex with your mom? And they'd whisper it because we're in third grade. And I'd have to tell them, I don't know. I don't know who my mom does and doesn't do that with. I'm in third grade. And as far as I know, no. That's not how it works. I don't believe that that person's spouse would be happy about that. But if that is how it works, then more power to them. Like I said, and that was kind of what spurred me to learn more about the process in general, so I can accurately answer those questions. But just people having the notion that they're always right about something when they're the one asking the questions, particularly about how it's genetically related to me, was always my biggest pet peeve with it.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that, because like, I wouldn't say it's a huge issue for me, but generally when I have to tell someone that I have two dads, they automatically assume I'm adopted. And, or like whenever I have, like I reference like some blood connection to any side of my family, they get kind of confused because they just have that, like whether or not it's conscious or not, just this assumption that I'm adopted. And then I have no problem like going back and explaining like however long it takes or however in depth they want of like the fact that I'm born through surrogacy. But because sometimes, like the way I was born, my egg donor was my aunt, and then so I have that blood connection to both sides of my family, whereas like not all like surrogacy not all surrogacy kids have that, and there are more that do now, but like people my age there aren't that many, so it's like people get confused by that. So it's not really a huge issue, but it's just something that I have to clarify a lot, because a lot of people just have that assumption that all like people with two dads are like adopted.
I think also just going back to the panel before, like, oh, why not adoption? Like, I think it's like just a common misconception, because like this isn't necessarily the case for everyone, but like some people want that like not saying that this is always the case, but some people want that emotional connection, like of having a biological child, and not everyone is able to do that. And so, like, surrogacy is like the gateway to having your biological child. And so, like, someone won't always want to, like, go through the process of adoption because they want that biological connection.
Well, it's just the most natural desire in the world to have a child with a genetic connection to yourself. How about you, Molly?
Yeah, I think a big misconception, especially with New York State and its kind of issues, is that the surrogate's being taken advantage of, that the surrogate she's being coerced somehow to sell this baby, and it's like those are the things that are just not right at all. It's like surrogacy. It's like you end up having such an emotional connection with the couples or a single person you're working with that it's like you never could not want to give them that baby. You went through, a year plus with them, in the journey. You're rooting for them from, the time you start your medication, and it's insulting to surrogates, like that other people feel like surrogates are either just in it for the money or surrogates, don't care. It's like, I'm just, and that's what, I really think they need to work on with the people who are opposing these laws. It's like they're opposing them for the wrong reasons.
Well, that is a perfect segue to the last question, and anyone can take this question. And that's, do you feel that the fact that this is being legislated, do you think that this debate contributes to any stigmatization that may surround surrogacy, the fact that it's so hotly debated?
To be honest, I didn't know that this was going on. I was under the happy assumption that surrogacy was a normal thing everywhere in the country with every family, because logically, maybe I'm 18 years old and naive. I don't see any other way to think about it. In the sense of how the woman might be taken advantage of, she's the one who's deciding to carry the kid. If she thinks $100 is enough to carry a kid for 9 months for a family, how are you going to tell her that's not enough if she's the one doing it? I just don't see the issue with the whole process in general to me. If someone is incapable of having someone with their genetics as a child, and that is what they truthfully desire, then they should have all the power to have that. If they don't feel that that's as important of a thing, then they should have all the power to adopt, or they can still choose surrogacy. I just straight up don't see how surrogacy has such a negative stigmatism when all it is two consenting parties both giving the other what they desire in the situation.
So I think also the whole thing with it's like you're selling a baby. Like, I don't think parents would go through all of this time and all of this money just to have a baby. I don't know how to explain it. I just feel like a common debate is that it's child trafficking, and it doesn't make sense.
Well, I think you're saying the desire to have a family is much, much deeper than that.
Yeah.
Right? Is that kind of what you're trying to say? Yeah. That being a child that was born through love, growing up, knowing how loved you are, that it has to be much deeper than that.
Yeah, and to add on to that, first of all, a person born through surrogacy, and second of all, as someone who's been one to experience a lot of this debate, living in New York, and also having been able to attend, for example, the conference in Brussels, where at 1 year they had people gathering outside the lobby of the hotel with signs and saying this is baby selling, or it was not in English, but there was a picture of a womb with a dollar sign on it and a big red cross, and it was just seeing that it hurts. It really does. And it's it didn't traumatize me in any way, because I was 16 or 17, and I had been growing up with this. I knew spoken on panels, I'm confident in who I am and the way I was brought into the world. So it's I can deal with it, but other people seeing that can be much more affected. And people who aren't educated about this, who've never met a surrogate, an egg donor, kids through surrogacy, people having kids through surrogacy, just who have no connection to it, they might not understand any better. And it's influencing a lot of people's opinions, and it's affecting real people, as you can see like up here. And like recently, I had a couple of conversations, like separate conversations, where it came up that surrogacy was illegal in New York, and they were like shocked. They're like, I thought New York was like a pretty liberal, progressive state, and they were like, I was like, yeah, well, you know, it's like one of only 3 states, and they were like, they could not comprehend how it could be illegal here, and it's just very interesting to think that like, all of together, all of those things, like they affect real people, and it's like, we need some change now.
So did I time that about right?
About right, but if we have 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah,
spend a few more minutes here, and if you might be hungry.
Do-
Why don't we take a couple more questions?
Yeah, does anyone, yeah, that would be great. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask anyone on the panel?
I know a lot of the concerns usually come from the parents, trying to learn. But before you became a surrogate, what was the biggest concern you had? The biggest thing you, either one of you, had to learn that you really needed clarity? That was a worry that you, or something that you really needed to dig into, learn more?
I think probably for me, I had worked at a fertility clinic, so I was good with that side of it. But it was like the legal aspects of it was things that I really didn't understand, like a pre-birth order and a court date and the things that had to be in a contract to make everything legal, so that the parents would have no problem. So those were probably the things that I had to learn more than anything in the process.
So many things. So I think the biggest one prior to becoming a surrogate for the first time was that kind of internal reflection that has to happen. I loved being pregnant with him, but I'll be honest, I was 17 when I got pregnant, and nobody threw me a baby shower. I gave up a full scholarship to a college out of state to stay home and raise him. I wore my husband's clothes because when you're 17 and planning for a baby, you don't go out and buy maternity clothes. So I knew that I liked being pregnant, and I was actually looking forward to the experience of being pregnant and getting to enjoy having a human life growing inside of me without the stress that came from preparing for a baby. But I really had to kind of reflect internally as to what type of a relationship I wanted with that child that I knew mentally, like I knew in my head that it wasn't going to be a biological child, and I knew I was giving it back to its parents. But I also, he brings home a new friend, and like, they're all my kids, I've got how many sons now? 17 of them. And every time one of them sees me, it's like, hey, Mom. And so when you start one of these contracts and they start asking you the kinds of questions, like what kind of relationship do you want to have with these parents and with the baby afterward, I really had to kind of figure out what was okay. And progression happens, I think, with each of these surrogate children that I've had. We've all said the same thing, like I want contact, and I love getting those like text messages and emails, and of course life happens. Like you get them super frequently in the first couple of months, and then it kind of piddles off and it's every couple of months, and then we check in once in a while, and then you don't see them for a year and a half. But just kind of knowing in my heart, like for myself, what kind of relationship I wanted after. I think that was the thing I needed to think about the most before going into it.
So when you say there was that separation, when you start getting texts frequently,
Yeah.
do you feel that separation, or does that?
Oh my God.
bother you so much?
Okay, so can I be honest? I love babies. I'm going to be a midwife. Clearly, I want to have all the babies around now, but I felt a deeper loss in the beginning from, I guess you could say, the attention. You've got this baby growing inside of you, and it's, at the end of the pregnancy, people are holding doors and they're asking you how you're feeling, and they're talking to you, and they're like pulling it all out, and you're getting all of this attention, and people want to be involved. And then like the next time you're at the grocery store without a baby in your belly or one in your arms, they have no idea that you had a kid a week ago, and that you're hormonal, and like they're not engaging with you, and nobody's holding the door open for you anymore. And these people that were texting and calling you like 27 times in the last week of your pregnancy, making sure you're okay. Do you need anything? Is it time yet? And then now they're home with their new baby, and they're not, like, I mourned that relationship and that attention a little bit in the beginning more than I did the baby that went home with his parents. And so I think that that was probably, for me, the thing that was the weirdest. It went from, like, with all of my IPs, like that super close connection, and I wanted them to feel like they were involved in the pregnancy, and I wanted them to be there for like as many appointments as they could, and to rub my belly and to be there for the birth. And I've had IPs catch their babies. The intended parents actually like be down there catching their babies, and cutting cords and doing skin to skin. But like you get such a close bond with them for that 9 months, and then towards the end, it's that really like intense connection, and then all of a sudden, it's over. And it wasn't really over, but it just transitions.
Yeah, but if you could have changed that, if there was a conversation you could have had with the intended parents, what would you have said?
Honestly, they all did a really good job of checking in and like being very grateful for, they get their child, which is what they wanted all along anyways. And so I never had anyone, thankfully for me, I just got really lucky all the time with amazing intended parents who really didn't abandon me, even though you feel that way. But I would suggest to anyone that not only spousal support, or like if she's single, having, good friends and good family, but doulas are like the most amazing people on the planet. They help, during labor and birth and in the initial postpartum period, and having somebody who can like really just kind of be there during the hormonal period. Plus a lot of times as surrogates we're pumping and giving milk and all of that stuff too.
That's
and
good
so
advice.
Just making sure that she's supported during that time, because while you're going home and transitioning to life with this new baby that you've desired for so long, it's also transition for us going back to life without having all of that.
That's an important point, I think. Any others? Maybe one more question? Yes.
I'd like to ask the two girls. We just had our baby this year, and what should we as parents be most prepared for and most on guard to protect our son as he gets older?
I don't really, at least like from like my case growing up, there was nothing really my parents had to protect me from. Like, just act as it's normal. Like I wouldn't like act like, oh, we're different. Like, just you are like everyone else. Like there's nothing different about that. Like, there might be people that are discriminating towards your son, and that's honestly just like the world that we live in. And like, you just got to get over that and know that there's nothing wrong with it. And like, just to surround yourself by the people that aren't gonna be like hating on you, and like basically, yeah, just there's nothing really to be like hiding your son from, or like protecting him from. Like, just it's normal, and just treat him as it's normal.
Yeah, that being said, like, I definitely agree. There's like, but I would also say there's not like a ton to worry about. Like, it seems really scary, probably. Like, I can't imagine being a parent, but like, it's kind of, it seems worse than it is. And like, yes, you shouldn't go and like live somewhere where it's like very homophobic or something like that. But it's also, and like, you can also take like small baby steps just to like, if you know that there might be someone who might have an issue with it, like just like confront them. If like, let's say like when your son's in kindergarten and like there's another parent of a kid in his class, but it's like you also, as long as like you kind of like, you're really honest with your kid and you're kind of like allowing them to be themselves while also like letting them know who they are, and not like, and just having a really honest relationship so they can be confident in their story. So like in that way, they won't ever, you're giving them themselves the confidence to like let anything that could potentially happen, like just bounce off. Like, instead of having them take it to heart, be like, oh, like I didn't know that people thought that, or like, oh, I didn't know that about surrogacy. Like, as long as they're confident in who they are, like they'll be able to deal with it on their own. But also I would say just don't worry about it too hard.
I know the question wasn't for me, but just to add my kind of 2 cents in. I don't know how it feels to be the child of a surrogacy, but from what I do know, in the whole situation, knowledge is power. The younger you can teach your child, your son, exactly how he came into this world in as positive of a light as you can, just be blatantly upfront with it. And as long as he understands what really happened, nothing anybody can say can really affect him, because most of the people that are disrespectful towards this kind of thing or that use that hateful speech are just ignorant. They have no idea what's really going on. And all it takes is just a little bit of knowledge, and one person's whole perspective on it can change. So the earlier you can instill that knowledge, just personally, I would suggest that's the earliest, best thing you could do.
I agree with that.
Well, on that note, let's thank our panel for sharing their stories.